Very good. Oh, you've got some good voices to sing. There is a land of fire and ice.
What?
And in the winter, the snow lays thick for months and months and months. And this land is an island. There are high cliffs all around. And there's only one place you can get off the island, where there's a little tiny beach, a stony beach. But the sea, across to the land over in the distance a long way off, the sea freezes in the winter. Now, if our winters lasted 6 months and everything was locked in snow and ice for 6 months and it was freezing cold and there was not much to do because there was no telephones, there was no internet, there was no TV, there was no radio, there was just people. And they lived in stone huts covered in turf. And in the middle of this hut there would be a fire. And at night the people would sit around the fire to warm themselves, and they would tell each other stories while the meal was cooking on the fire. And this fire, well, it also lit up the little hut that they lived in, this little stone hut, and it kept them warm and it gave them a little bit of light.
Wow.
And they cooked their food and they told stories around the fire.
What?
But the fires began to go out one after the other. In the main hut where they were, that big fire, eventually that went out too. They woke the next morning, freezing cold. It is so cold. Oh, the fire's gone out. Oh, it's so cold. Someone light a fire. I don't know how to light a fire. Someone knew, but he said, well, the things we need, the flint and the sticks, that's all under the snow and ice, we can't get to that. But they realised they couldn't light a fire. They ran back into their huts. The fire's gone out. We've got no fire. We've got no fire. If we have no fire in this freezing weather, we might die from the cold. Or someone needs to speak to the people on the mainland. But how? Well, they tried a trumpet, they had a horn, and they blew on the horn, but you know, it was too far away, and the ice just took that sound and froze it in the air. They shouted across the sea, but their voices were frozen in the air. And they thought, what should we do? What should we do? And a young man, he'd only been a boy a few weeks before, and then he was initiated as a man. But he was a young man.
Yeah.
He said, I will go on a journey across the frozen sea to the mainland and tell them that we need fire. And the villagers said, but it's so dangerous. The sea, you could come across a bit where the ice is thin, you could fall in and you would die. But I will go, he said. And he turned to his sister, who was a little bit younger than him, and he said, come with me, sister. And she said, I will. And she stood beside her brother. And she said, we will go together. And then, you know, their youngest brother, they had a younger brother still, he stepped up and he said, I want to come with you too. And the oldest boy and the sister, they looked at their mother and father, and the father and mother went, he could go with them. For these children had been taught the ways of the land. They'd been taught the ways of the sea, they'd been taught the ways of the animals. They knew nature really, really well. So they knew what they were doing. And all the villagers went down to that little piece of beach with all the cliffs all the way around. And then they stepped onto the ice of the frozen sea. Their journey began. And it was a long journey. They thought, if only we could tell the mainland, but we've got to do this journey, this dangerous journey. So they began to walk across the frozen sea. Well, In this part of the world, the weather can change. It began to rain. Not like the rain we have here. This rain, when it hit your face, it stung like little bees were stinging you. It stung that much, they pulled their hoods up, but on they walked. Well, of course, the rain began to affect the ice, and it started to get a bit slushy, a bit thinner in places, a bit more dangerous, but on they walked. And then they came to a place. The oldest brother saw it first. There was a black dash that went right across the sea through the white snow and slush. It's not frozen all the way across. And he stood to where this sea just was running. It was black and it was deep and it was cold. He thought, how do I get across to the other side of the ice? And he just stepped back, he just ran and he just jumped. And we got across. He said, sister, come. And she was a bit more sensible. She got and she looked. She could see the distance. She thought about her body and her muscles and what she could do. She took a couple of steps back. She ran and she got across. And then they turned to their youngest brother. And he came and he stood on the edge of the ice. Do this. Brother, sister, it's too far for me to jump. It's too far. Go back home. His brother and sister said, go back home. But what about you? Will it be okay? Go back home to mother and father. And the boy turned and he began to walk back, but he stopped. He turned and he watched his brother and sister walking away in the distance across that frozen sea. For a moment he thought to himself, will I ever see them again? And then he carried on. But he didn't want to go home. He wanted to get across the sea. He wanted to do it. So he carried on walking along, trying to find somewhere. And he thought, there must be somewhere I can jump across. He was walking along, and suddenly there was a crack! Whoa! And the piece of ice that he was on broke away from the ice. And suddenly he was just squatting on a piece of ice. And the sea just trilled on. He was completely out of control. There was nothing he could do. He just stayed on this piece of ice wondering what was going to happen. And the ice, well, it bumped into the ice on the other side, where the sea had frozen on the other side, and he jumped off. He didn't dare move. He didn't dare move. He barely was breathing. For there was a mother polar bear. And she had her 2 cubs. And if you could come between a mother polar bear and her cubs, she will kill them. He stood completely still. Didn't dare move. The mother bear, she smelt it. Began to walk over on her hind leg, a huge white polar bear, mother bear. She walked up to that boy and just stood there. She sniffed it. And then she began to walk and she stopped and she looked at the boy. And you know, the boy knew that he was to follow her. And they sheltered in this snow cave. And there they lay, mother bear, snuggling up to her cubs and the boys so that they could keep warm. And then she fed the 2 cubs her milk. And then she fed the boys. And the next morning, she got up and the boy knew he was to follow her outside. And he went outside and the bear, she dropped her shoulder and the boy knew to scramble on her back. He just knew. She stood up and she wriggled and wriggled and wriggled and wriggled and wriggled and wriggled. And he held on. He was ready. He was ready. The mother bear with the boy on her back. She walked over to the edge of the ice and she dropped into the sea. And she began to swim with the boy on her back. Well, while this was going on, 3 days had passed. All the villagers were really worried. They were freezing cold. They thought, we can't go another day, surely. We're going to die. And what of the children? Where are they? Where are they? Perhaps they've died. And then one of the villagers was just looking along the horizon line. There's a polar bear coming. There's a polar bear coming. There's a polar bear coming. It's got the boy on its back. It's got the boy on its back. And the polar bear, she swam to that beach and she stood. She came onto the beach and the boy jumped. He said, Father, get some hot milk for her. And Father went to his goats and he milked the goat and he got some lovely warm milk in an oak pan and he put it down in front of the mother bear and she lapped that. The bear got into the sea and began to swim and the bear turned to look at the villagers. As if to say thank you. And then the bear, she carried on into the distance. All the villagers were watching Mother Bear. They couldn't believe what they'd seen. And then one of the villagers, when he panned the horizon line once again, there's a star. Look, there's a star in the sky, but it's not high, it's really low. That's so strange. And it's yellow, it's orange, it's red, it's what is it? It's fire. They said it's fire. Fire is floating across the sea. And then eventually they could see that it was a boat. The sea had melted enough, the ice had melted enough. The boat was finding a way through the ice, and on the top of it had a metal cauldron full of fire. And there was the oldest boy and his sister. They were bringing fire back to the island. And it landed on the beach. Mother, Father, they ran, brother. Well, they were hugged and they kissed and they brought fire to the island and they distributed the fire into the little huts so that they were warm. Oh, this is so good. We can eat, we can keep warm, and we can tell stories again. And they were all saved. And, you know, it is said that after this, the villagers never ever let their fire go out again. And that's the story of the islanders and the polar bear. That's a folk story from Iceland. Thank you.